All right, happy Thursday, everybody out there in podcast land. This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan in the house. I am Chris Maselli, and on today's episode, we're going to be getting to Nazem Kadri's grade. Don't be surprised at what it is. The voting's not even over, but we were just like, this is such a runaway, obviously. Why wait? So we're going to talk about him. I want to talk a little bit about Jared Bednar and kind of like the future for him. What does it look like for Jared Bednar? And my good friend Kyle has come over to the good side. If you're on YouTube and you see the shirt that he is stretching right now, he is converting to a Denver Broncos fan. And if you're listening, you're like, he wasn't a Denver Broncos fan to begin with. He was not. So because of his new fandom, we'll talk about why he's officially putting his weight behind the Broncos. He can throw some questions at me on some Broncos lore or whatever he has in his mind. And even though we are a Locked On Avalanche podcast, we can throw some Broncos stuff, and the football season is right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So we are Locked On Avalanche / Locked On Broncos just for a little bit of a day. We're not stealing your thunder, Cody. Don't worry.
We're coming.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I cut you off. So you were saying something about Cody and the Locked On Broncos podcast, and I cut you off. Go for it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Keep me back. I said we're coming for you, Cody.
Yeah. No, we are not coming for you, Cody. You rule that stratosphere with the Broncos, but we can talk about it, and we're happy to have you on board, sir. It's a fun wagon to be on. So. And thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Avalanche podcast. That's always appreciated for making this your first listen of the day. Go check us out on our social media, LOP_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram, questions, comments, concerns, opinions, Locked On Avalanche at gmail.com, and follow us on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. And today we are going to continue giving season grades for people, and that's where we will start. And for this one, it's Nazem Kadri, and he seems to be in the news a lot lately, understandably so, for kind of doing nothing is why he's in the news. But for today, for this podcast, we're going to give his season grade. And like I said in the beginning, there's still like a few hours left to vote on this. If you want to go on social media and do that, feel free. But it's all running away with an easy A, comfortable A for Nazem Kadri across the board. And as of right now, this is the highest grade percentage-wise someone has got for any particular grade. And on Instagram, I think it's in the 90s. Twitter is like 89%. You have some funny people who want to put the D and F. Vote for that, whatever. I think I drew more attention to it by saying, don't you dare in the D and F part. And then same thing with YouTube. That's like hovering over 90%. So clearly an A for Nazem Kadri. Well, for social media. For you and I'm assuming we're both going A+ for him. And well, I am. I mean, you're looking to the heavens right now. Is the Nazem Kadri stand not going A+ for Nazem Kadri on the season?
Oh no, it's an A+.
Okay, you had me worried there. Oh my god.
It's called this in the podcast business. This is what you call a tease.
I mean, he could have had half the points he had of the season. You probably would have given him an A+.
You're very correct.
Yeah, but what can we say that hasn't already been said about Nazem Kadri?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the first Locked On Avalanche season grade that we're giving to a Boston Bruin. But
whoa.
No.
I was on mute so I could take a drink of my seltzer, and I had to unmute I was choked.
I saw you taking the drink. I wanted to throw that out there. But no, I saw that Boston's now putting some feelers out there, and that's the new team circling around Nas. And honestly, if you look at the stats and where, like, when he came in, the season following was a little bit of a step down statistically. And then last season was just leaps and bounds above anything that Nas has done in Colorado, and surpassed anything, even his best season in Toronto. And just the way he changed his game, the level-headedness that he approached the game with, the clean approach with the hockey IQ at the forefront, and kept his play being the thing that talks and not his fist, and not trying to, skate on that edge and get his advantage that way. It's more of outthinking, and just this whole new Nas. It's absolutely incredible. It deserves an A plus, especially if you're talking about optimizing what you did the year before, capitalizing, refining, and giving a better effort. I mean, he even talked about it in the Tribune piece. Like, everything he's done has been to improve his game, and there hasn't been one thing that you could say, I don't like that about Nas, other than his age, which he cannot help.
And I think we get a little too bent out of shape about his age right now. And we're not talking about his age today. We're talking about his age at the end of the contract he hasn't signed yet.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, and I understand that, and that's a conversation you can have. It's kind of the conversation we've been having with Gabe Landeskog.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of his current contract, he's gonna be in his late 30s. We're gonna be paying him $7 million a year, but you don't worry about that because you can do something in the system. If he's not working out, you can get rid of it. Like, and they there's smart people involved here. You know what I mean? So I think that's the problem with a lot of people is talking about Nazem Kadri and his age. It's for a long-term contract which they're assuming he's going to sign, and I get that. I do. But as far as the year that he just had, and we've said it many times on this show, like, nobody expected that. It was welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in some way we're dealing with the repercussions of that because he's still not signed. I don't know why. I cannot figure this out, man. I don't want to get too much into it because this is his season grade, and we've talked over and over about it. But even, when the Islanders news came out, which is now 3 days old, and there's been no movement there.
Done deal, huh?
Right. Yeah. So as far as his season goes, though, like I said, nobody was expecting it. But I think a lot of people were saying, like, he had the capability to do that. And if you want to say he was on a good team, then fine. But he's part of the reason why they're a good team. And when you look at his stats for the season, let me bring up the game logs here. So he started the year against Chicago, 1 goal, 1 assist. The next game against St. Louis, he had 2 assists. And then he didn't score for 4 games. He went, I think it was 3 for the rest of the season, 3 or 4 times he didn't score in back-to-back games. And those were his longest streaks of the year.
Wow.
After that 4-game pointless streak in the very beginning of the season. He scored in almost every single game after that. And if he had 1 game where he didn't score, he scored the next game. And it was only 3, I think it was 3, like I said, possibly 4, where he didn't score in back-to-back games. I mean, when you have that many points, you're going to see that. But for a player like Nazem Kadri, that's just an impressive season from beginning to end.
And Leafs fans don't really look fondly on the players that leave the blessed Toronto Maple Leafs. But producer Drew, we've had him on. We talked to producer Drew. They had a piece about the one that got away, being Nas. For that to be like the caliber of play, for it to be that surprising that Toronto's like, maybe we should have kept him around. Maybe he's always had that in him. To change the narrative on what your old fan base used to think about you, that speaks a lot. Like, we still speak bad about Duchesne and O'Reilly and Stasny and Barry and everybody that's left and Grubauer, but for somebody to leave and then make you regret it, and you could tell that was his MO this whole year with how he addressed the press after he won the cup, about talking about his haters and all he's gone through. Like, the man was on a personal mission. And that, I agree with your point. Like, that goes a lot to the inflated price because everybody is kind of mistaking this production for the norm and forgetting there is a personal side to this stat inflation that won't be there next year.
Assuming he's not with the Avalanche.
Even if he comes back to Colorado, he's proven all of his haters wrong. He got a cup in Colorado, not Toronto. He got it here. He was the best in the hockey world here. Next year, he's got to find something else to drive him through the rest of the 82 games. And it might not be as potent as proving everybody wrong.
I mean, I think you can always drum that up, as long as you've been dealing with that your entire life. I get what you're saying. Like winning one just will shut everybody up.
Mm-hmm.
Winning two just continues to prove everybody wrong about their thoughts for you. So, but I would like to see him return with the Avs just to see what he can follow up with this season that he had. As far there was a couple stats here over on excuse me, Money Puck. And you were talking about, we've said it many times about how well behaved he was this year. And there's two things. So he had 61 penalty minutes, which is still, a good amount for him. But we've said so many times, none of them just seemed like out of anger or frustration.
Mm-hmm.
It was just because he plays the game hard. Okay. So 61 penalty minutes. He drew 79 penalty minutes. So, teams are going to go after him. He has that characteristics, and people think of him as that type of player. Like, I can engage him and he'll engage me back. So the fact that he had more penalties drawn than penalties he took, I think by a differential of -18, next to Nathan MacKinnon. Nathan MacKinnon is the only one that drew more penalty minutes than Nazem Kadri. And it was pretty close. Nathan MacKinnon had 84. So he had 5 more penalty minutes. So on that end, that's a guy who is not, retaliating. If he's retaliating on the penalty he's drawing, he's going to be so far that the penalties he takes are going to be so much higher than the penalties he's drawn because he's retaliating. He didn't do that this year.
That's why it's taken him so long to come back. He doesn't want to come back to that power play that didn't do anything for him.
No. Well, it wasn't all bad for the power play. But and the other thing that stuck out to me was expected goals per 60 minutes. Led the team in 1.29. And that's 0.03 better than Gabe Landeskog, who's in second for that. So, when you have a season like he had, and his points per 60 minutes were 3.82. That's the high. Actually, that's 0.04 less than Nathan MacKinnon. So it's number 2 on the team. It's just, you can go through all of these stats and he's going to be at the top. When you score that many points in a season, everything is going to look good. Congratulations. That's, the best season he had. And now he's going to cash in on it. Who knows where it's going to be? And like I said a few minutes ago, I would like to see it with the Avalanche, to see him continue, because that's the question for him. This is so far above anything he's ever done before. What can he do the following year? And it's not, and I think a lot of people are asking that question because he is 32. And I'm not saying, again, like I said, that's not old, but you've played a handful of seasons and you've never done this before. So a lot of people are there with their arms folded saying you have to do something similar next year. I don't care where you're playing. And I think that's fair.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
All right. Let's hear from BetOnline, and then we're going to talk some Jared Bednar stuff. So betonline.net's fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, esports, golf, and combat sports. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. And you can go to betonline.net. Of course, that's where the game starts. All right, we have the best coach in the league. I think that's well known, and his travels have been well known. Where he took the Stanley Cup, back to his roots with his coaching, like all that stuff. We know everything about Jared Bednar. We love everything about Jared Bednar. But I wanted to kind of look into maybe like the mirror ball and look into the future. And I don't know how many years, if you want to say 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, whatever you want to say. But I always like kind of like guessing that, like playing a guessing game for coaches who are like proven winners, basically. And and maybe this is like a morbid thing to do, but players always move on and players jump around all over the place. And for a coach who's shown he can win, not just in the win column, but you've won a championship now. And again, maybe people are like, why are you even talking about this? I always wonder how it's going to end for them.
Yeah.
And I always think, so someone who can do no wrong right now, Jared Bednar, he could do the dumbest thing and we would be like, well, there's a reason behind that. But, he's using it for motivation purposes or whatever. We can create whatever narrative we want to back Jared Bednar right now. But I always think of, like I said, like down the road, like where would it go wrong? Does it go wrong? And I don't want to also bring up just the fact that these would go wrong. Maybe he coaches another 10 years for the Avs, makes him far and away the best coach in franchise history, and then they promote him to a office job. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times people will think like coaches are just hired to get fired. And probably for 99% of the time, that is true. Could Jared Bednar buck that trend? Will he just resign eventually? Say like, I want to see a new team. Like, I think about all these things and I'm wondering what you're thinking.
No, and you honestly, as an Avs fan, you probably should be thinking that way because we're not used to having a head coach, one, be this successful, two, stay with us this long. Like, if you want to think back at the Hartley years, they did not last long. Like, we've been through some coaches.
Yeah, every team goes through coaches, right?
And this has to end at some point. And you would see Bednar coaching to the end of maybe the big three and their contracts. Yeah. And if they're walking out the door, maybe he's inspired to coach the next generation of Avalanche. But also, you can also see it flipping the other way, that maybe the next 2 or 3 years, the Avs starts taking a step back. And I feel like Bednar, with his quality, his character, and just his drive, if he feels like he lost the locker room, that he takes that, like that Paul Maurice, like, I'm just stepping back. They're not listening to me anymore. Right, yeah. I've lost the locker room. And I feel like wherever this goes, he's behind the driver's seat. Like, he is driving this. If he's going to leave, it's because the locker room's not listening to him anymore. He's not effective. He's going to remove himself. But as long as things are booking and the Avs are in the playoffs and they're a threat every year, he's going to be here.
Yeah.
Until he just can't physically do it anymore.
Because I think the interesting thing is, like, he's been with the team through, one in particular horrible season. Mm-hmm. And then he's been with them, through the playoffs and, second round exits multiple seasons in a row. And then finally you win the Stanley Cup. Everything that happened before it, Joe Sakic could have removed him a handful of times. Mm-hmm. So that begs the question, when would Joe Sakic, like, what would he need to do wrong for Joe Sakic to really fire this guy?
Because he's criminal.
Yeah, it'd have to be off the ice, I would have to think, right?
Yeah.
Because he's stuck with him through so much. Even, you stuck with him when the team was losing. And I say this, and it's weird to say it, you stuck with him when the team was winning. Mm-hmm. but they were exiting the playoffs. And for a lot of GMs and presidents and owners, when it gets to be like, okay, that's not good enough, we need that coach to get us over that second round hump. They could have said that multiple years in a row, and they didn't. So I'm fascinated by this because I love it. Yeah. I don't like this revolving door of coaches in any sport. And I think for a lot of times, like, coaches are the fall men. Sometimes it's deserved. And other times it's, depending on the sport, where the players kind of dictate or if they want this coach around anymore. And I can't stand that. I can't stand it, because we're going to talk about the Denver Broncos in the next segment, and nobody ever thought Mike Shanahan was going to get fired, ever.
Yeah.
They thought he was stuck there. And no matter what the Broncos did, if they went 0-16, Mike Shanahan wasn't going anywhere. And then there was one year that, they had to make the move, and Pat Bowlen pulled the trigger. But they had a press conference afterwards. It wasn't like that was a different situation. And I get the Mike Shanahan vibes with Jared Bednar, that he's going to be around here for a while, because even if he's losing, he's shown that he can gather the guys, get me the right guys, Joe Sakic and Chris McFarland. That's your job. And then I'll coach them. And I just feel like it's a good dynamic right now.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's funny you mentioned that. Like, I get serious Mike Shanahan vibes from this whole deal. And like, you saw how the Florida Panthers handled Burnett. Like, he's an assistant coach right now in New Jersey, of all places.
That's incredible.
Like, it doesn't matter what you do, because that front office can change at any time. And that's another thing the Avalanche are lucky. Their front office when it rotates, it's promotions. It's not cleaning house. And you can't say that through the rest of the league.
No.
And that has a lot to do with how the Avalanche are building. And like, if the Avs go back and win 20 games, you have this confidence in Bednar in the front office where you're like, well, I wonder what they're going to do to get out of this. You don't feel like everything is broken because of everything the team and the front office has proven to this point.
Yeah. And I think as long as you have the backing of your superstars, he'll never lose the locker room as long as he doesn't lose Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Gabe Landeskog, Mikko, guys like that. As long as that they remain like a tight unit, when all these maybe like younger guys or free agents come over and they're kind of like questioning like what Jared Bednar is doing, all of those guys would be like, no. Yeah. You need to fall in line here. He calls the shots. Like, this is how we do. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like they're all coaches basically. So I like this because it just feels different. It doesn't feel like we have a coach that at the sign of him slipping up, management is going to lose faith in him and show him the door. I kind of feel like this is like a Greg Popovich situation.
Yeah.
Where he's just got tenure, man. And they'll have ups and downs, and you want to win, some championships along the way. And I think the Avalanche are smart enough to know that, like, you can't win it every single year. This is not the Boston Celtics of like the 70s. But as long as we're competitive, as long as, your players are trying hard, you're our coach.
Yep.
So and by the end of this, whoever it comes after him is going to have a long road ahead of them to catch everything that Jared Bednar has done when it's all said and done. I feel like there's multiple championships coming. The wins are just going to continue to pile up. He could be that name or that face on the Mount Everest. He really could be.
He's our Patrick Waugh of coaches right now. Like, he's putting up stats and numbers that other players can't touch. Like, when it comes to forward and defense, you can hit those records and numbers. But if you're an Avalanche goaltender, you're not eclipsing Waugh in our lifetime. And that's the same for any other coach. You're not going to surpass or jump Bednar in anything he's done for the team.
No. All right. We mentioned Mike Shanahan, coach of the Denver Broncos. And Mr. Shaggy Von Doom is coming over to the good side. If you're a longtime listener to this show, you know that he grew up in Alabama, and that is everybody in Alabama a Titans fan, or that's just who you latched onto?
You either get the Titans, you get the Falcons, or you get the Saints.
Okay, so you have three to choose from, and you've been a Titans fan. Are you completely like removing your fandom from the Titans, or tell everybody the reasoning behind all of this?
All right. And if everybody remembers the timeline of the Titans, I was a Broncos fan originally. I fell in love with Elway. I love Terrell Davis. Ed McCaffrey, honestly, was my favorite player. And when the Titans moved from Houston to Tennessee as a young kid, you're like, oh, a local team. And then the Titans, they came out with that logo. You're like, my team. Same
Very
epiphany
impressionable.
I had. Yeah,
Right.
the same epiphany I had when the Avs changed from Quebec to the Colorado Avalanche. I was like, my team right here. That's what I did with the Titans. They're over here. They haven't done a thing for me. It's been you want to talk about a sad fandom? Like
The
we
relationship
just
is running stale.
Zach Levi just had a movie about beating us in the Super Bowl, and that wasn't even the point of the story. But being Kurt Warner, I'm so sick of hearing about 1 yard. But my Titans fans are over here. It's a fandom, whatever. But I'm supporting my Broncos now. My Broncos,
You've
because
adapted them as my Broncos. Love it.
it's out of the love for the Avalanche. I'm supporting the Denver sports, like Rockies, Nuggets. Like let's go, let's do this thing. And it's time for me to get reacquainted with the Broncos, because it's been a long time since Elway was wearing the jersey, and Terrell Davis, I have no idea where he is, and
I think he's
McCaffrey's
still on
son
NFL
is
Network.
playing.
Yeah, and he's a dynamo.
He's yeah.
Yeah, man. Like I think that's people like I mean, I'm a few years older than you, but in that age demographic, grew up just John Elway was a king, and that's what turned me onto that. I mean, born and raised in New York, I had to do a state report, and my state was Colorado when I was in like 4th grade. And at that time, the only teams in Colorado were professional sports were the Nuggets and the Broncos. Rockies hadn't got there yet. Avalanche hadn't got there yet. So doing that portion of the report, and doing it on like the Broncos and John Elway, coupled with Tecmo Bowl on Nintendo, being the Broncos on that, it was just like, yeah, I'm a huge Broncos fan and have been ever since. So I have a pretty good grasp on some Broncos history. So is there anything that you need to know to be anointed into Bronco country?
First question, it's not Mile High Stadium anymore, is it?
No, and that's a big people don't like talking about that so much because that was just iconic. And then when they tore that down and made it, I think the first naming of the new stadium was Invesco Field.
I remember
they named it Invesco Field at Mile High. And ever since then, the naming rights have flipped over a handful of times. Whatever it is, it's at Mile High. And I think that it kind of like suited the Avs fans a little bit. Some are purists and they're like, no, Mile High Stadium. I think we've just become so accustomed to stadiums being named after companies now that it's not as much as a point of contention as it used to be.
Do they still have the Bronco on the scoreboard?
The big white one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. It's
okay.
still there. And they still have, when they score touchdowns, like they got a cheerleader on the horse with the flag. It's still a big deal.
We're not Mile High saluting anymore though.
No, sometimes every once in a while they do it. That was so. I mean, that became just so much history, and that was a Terrell Davis age. And like it's saying for getting turned on to the Broncos by John Elway, for so many Bronco fans, like he's Mr. Bronco, and he is for me. But if you were to ask me who like my favorite Bronco of all time is, it's probably Terrell Davis. And he's the one that started it. He's the one that started the Mile High salute. It's almost like Joe Sakic is John Elway.
Yeah.
And like Peter Forsberg is Terrell Davis.
Yeah.
And what could have been for not injuries for both of those guys, especially Terrell Davis. He was so fun to watch. Oh my God. You just knew he was going to have a good game every game.
See, as you can see, like my questions are like catching me up from what I remember the first time. Like,
yeah.
So I could get with the stadium, no Mile High salute. That's fine. I'll bring it back. What are they going to do? They're going to get mad at me. That's fine. And I see that we now have Danger Russ as our quarterback in Denver. How offensively, how are they set up? Like Are they pretty potent?
They're young. From what I understand, they're young on offense. But they have a really good running back who I think a lot of people are hoping like takes over for Melvin Gordon. His name is escaping me right now. I'm sorry. But he's a beast, that guy. And just so many young like wide receivers that have all the potential. And I think the Broncos are thinking like, we need an elite quarterback to get them the ball.
Yeah.
Like we can't have like these iffy quarterbacks like getting them the ball. But then they had Tim Patrick, who is on the rise. He's out for the season.
I saw that today.
That hurts. But
That's
think
right. I'm subscribing to those tweets now. I'm reading all about it.
I'm telling you, man, like there hasn't been this much excitement for a Broncos season in a long time, but they have this, great quarterback and a good team, and in by far the most difficult division in the NFL. And the West hasn't been in a long time. We've always had that top team, and then the other three kind of like battle it out, or maybe two of them battle out, and one like is horrible. But now all four of these teams, I saw a power ranking the other day. I think it was on CBS Sports. All four teams are in the top 10. All four teams. And it was, I think the Broncos were 9 and the Raiders were 10. And then I think Kansas City and San Diego were like 2 and 3 or something like that. It's going to be
the Trent Green Kansas City days. Those were fun games.
Yeah.
Those were a lot easier.
I know. It's going to be tough. So welcome aboard. I'm glad it's going to be a fun season to watch. So you came back at the right time.
How's Tim Tebow?
Dude, you know what, man? Like those were fun years. I mean, you look back on him now, and everything he did after the Broncos was just horrible. Yeah. But his time with the Broncos, he won games, and he's got a play that will live in Broncos infamy.
Yeah,
in the overtime bomb to Demaryius Thomas against Pittsburgh.
He was almost a Titan at one point. They were trying. So
when they got Manning, right? Were they trying to get him, or was this another time?
The Titans were going after Manning, and they also tried going after Tebow as well. And they're still trying to go after Manning to make him some kind of management role. So
probably still.
But we don't talk about that other T team, but
yeah. I mean, it's right. I mean, what they have a preseason game this weekend or next weekend.
As you're listening to this episode, preseason starts tonight.
Really? I just NFL preseason. I don't even care. So.
I've been hyped for this season, my friend.
Yeah,
this is bringing.
It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one. I think they'll at least they'll be competitive.
Yeah,
and maybe win some more games that were those close games that they'd lose. Maybe they're going to win some. So it's going to be fun to watch this Broncos team.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast, however, but it's the off season. So sometimes we diverge a little bit and we can talk some Bronco football. Why not? But definitely go check out Cody and Sayer over on Locked On Broncos. They do a great job. So check them out. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today. And the Kadri watch continues. Will it end tomorrow? We shall see. Until then, he's Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli. Thank you for making Locked On Avalanche your first listen of the day. See you guys later.